Longtime Boston Globe columnist Bob Ryan. How you doing, Bob?
Hey, good, Rich. Thank you.
So when Gordon Hayward went down in a heap, what did you think about the chances of the Celtics this season?
That they would still be able to keep their head above water, make the playoffs, perhaps win. Well, they won 53 last year. I would say, 48, 49, something. But make the playoffs, get a mid-range seed, maybe get lucky, you can get a 4. But they might be playing that first round on the road, the whole thing. But they weren't. They weren't stripped of talent, and I thought, now if this, if that, and so forth. Here's the other thing, Rich. That's the one position that they had depth. They had real depth in numbers, and at that point they didn't have Marcus Morris yet, but we knew he was coming, and they were going to have some numbers at that position. But what's happened is beyond anyone's imagination so far. No one, starting with Brad Stevens, who's cautioning people, we have to play better offense, which is true, to keep this thing going. No one saw it coming. So, and finally, they had Irving. And this is going to, and I wrote right at the time, okay, Kyrie, you wanted to be the man. Well, this is it for you. You got your chance now. And he's answered the bell.
He sure has. It really is amazing. Let's get into it, though, with Stevens, because so much, obviously, Belichick gets all the pub there, and Francona got a lot of pub when he was winning championships with the Red Sox. Stevens hasn't won a championship yet. He hasn't even won a conference championship yet. But what have you seen from him? What does he do to make this thing work the way that he has since coming out of Butler?
There isn't any secret sauce, but what he has shares in common. Now, this is my, so-called professional judgment, observing coaches in all sports for over 45 years. That the common ingredient of the really successful coaches, and it's starting with they got to have talent. All right, and we're talking about people who accomplish something, and they're not just making chicken salad out of chicken, but people who have some talent to start with. But the whole thing is, do they buy what you're selling, and can you sell it properly, and can you convince them that what you are going to tell them will work? This is what Belichick does, and this is what Pop does. This is what you can go down the list of whoever football other coaches. I'm sure it's what Scotty Bowman did. I'm sure it's what Joe Quenneville does. These guys have it. There's a certain it. Some guys don't. Some guys are lieutenants who can't be a general. That phenomenon exists in every sport at every time, and they get exposed quickly. There's one in New York City coaching a certain football team. That he's a lieutenant. He's not a general, and you don't know until you give him the try. Every successful, famous coach of history had to have a first job, had to have a training ground somewhere, but. That's all it is to it. He recognizes talent. He puts people in a position to do their best. And whatever he sells on a daily basis, however he carries himself, he's not a phony. I learned from my good friend Hubie Brown years ago, you have to be true to your personality. You have to be whatever it is. In his case, it's a relatively low-key one. It's a low-key, laid-back Midwestern one from Zionsville, Indiana. And he isn't trying to be anybody other than who he is. And the one thing I'll shut up and let you talk.
No, please, Bob.
Is that unlike certain other people, it's not about the ego. Players know when the coach thinks it's about him. I think they know, and they never like that, and not on a professional level. You can get away with that in college, but they know he doesn't think it's about him, so it works.
DirecTV 4K NBA report here on the Rich Eisen Show. Bob Ryan, kind enough to call in to provide some insight here, certainly for the red-hot Boston Celtics here on the Rich Eisen Show. And in terms of the 15 wins, or just the 17 games that we've seen already for the Celtics, Bob, I mean, the season-opening loss, they still damn near won that game.
Yes.
In which Gordon Hayward went down, and you could just excuse that the team would be lost in that, and then certainly in the next game trying to figure out how to put all the pieces together. And then in this win streak, the fact that they beat the Warriors too. Now that was kind of the showstopper for me, because I'm looking to see how we are not all on the NBA Titanic ready to just hit that Warriors reef by June anyway, that we're just rearranging deck chairs until then. What did you read into that Celtics win against Golden
First of all, they
State?
came from 17 down with a 19-0 run. I think that's done. The people who follow that team, I was watching Twitter that night. They were they were having their minds were just screwed up. You wanted to use the F word, but you know what I mean. It was screwed up. Nobody runs a 19-0 run on the Warriors. But the Celtics did. They made a 19-0 run, which means you need both ends of the floor to accomplish what you did, and they did it. And they got back in the game that way. And then, they showed the same kind of spunk, that they've shown again in other games. They've now come from 17 down 3 times in this streak, or 15 at least. I think 17 is true, but I might be wrong. But mid double-digit deficits have been overcome 3 times. Okay, I'll settle for that. And they did it against the Warriors, and who were at full strength. That night they were at full strength. Curry played. Curry was terrible. He was 3 for 14. Klay Thompson was 5 for 18. They were 8 for 32 between them. Meanwhile, Irving was 4 for 14 himself, so it wasn't so great. But they finally won the game though in a classic NBA fashion. They have the virtuoso superstar. He went to the basket. Nobody touched him. He went to the line, made 2 free throws. And if Terry Rozier had made that same drive to the basket, I promise you the whistle would not have blown. But that's why you want guys like that on your team.
Bob Ryan, the Boston Globe, here on the show. Ask him the poll question, Christopher. This is Chris from Maine asking Boston Globe's finest Bob Ryan the question.
Which team that started the year 0-2 has the best chance to win their respective title? 0-2 Saints now have won 8 straight, or the 0-2 Celtics who have now won 15 straight?
What do you think, Bob?
Well, because I'm involved in both ends of that, because the team that they would eventually have to beat would be the New England Patriots, more than likely. Not necessarily, but more than likely. And they're not beating the Patriots. Patriots beat the crap out of them the first time, and I know that the rematches are often very different, but I would like to think the Patriots would prevail over them if that's who they were wound up playing. If they're playing anybody but the Patriots, then they'd have a shot. So I'll have to go Celtics, but that's only to answer that question. I am not calling the Celtics to win. I'm not even calling them to beat the Cavaliers until I am totally satisfied the Cavaliers aren't going to get it together.
Wouldn't that be interesting?
I've had this discussion with people.
Wouldn't
People are telling me they can't get it together. Their personnel this year in this group won't allow it. They're not going to be able to play the defense they need to play. It's not going to happen. LeBron's going to have to be beyond Superman to carry them through this year. That's what some people think, but I'm not buying that yet. I'm going to withhold judgment on that.
Well, especially since the other part of that trade really hasn't. I mean, Jay Crowder's been there, but everyone's kind of waiting for the Boston Jay Crowder to step up and show himself on a consistent basis in Cleveland. We haven't seen IT, what he's going to look like there. I mean, wouldn't that be interesting to see him put wind beneath the wings of the Cavs in the same way that Kyrie's done for the Celtics, Bob?
It would, and it would be such great theater, and I really would be looking forward to that series for that reason. And I mean, he's such a great little competitor. I mean, he was so liked here and loved here, and people. It was a very bittersweet thing losing him, but you're gaining a true superstar in Irving.
Now, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about the Patriots before I let you go, even though, again, we're in the DirecTV 4K NBA report here on the Rich Eisen Show. I would be remiss because here we go. Here's Brady again, right? He's now just using whatever he can. If you say he can't do it at 40, let him throw for 5,000 yards as a 40-year-old, which he's going to do. I mean, it's going to happen. So where does he – let's put on the oxygen masks and go to 100,000 feet in the Boston Pantheon here. Is he – because you could make the case we could have an argument about the greatest Celtic of all time, potentially, and we could potentially have the greatest argument about the greatest Red Sox of all time. There's no argument who the greatest Patriot of all time is.
Nor the greatest Bruin, because we're still the transcendent hockey player.
Okay, I like that.
But
where,
yeah, I love this discussion. I get it all the time. And on the Rushmore thing,
yes.
He is number one. He's on the Rushmore, the four.
Sure.
The four are Russell, or Ted Williams and Brady. And Brady's and now here the funny thing about the Brady thing is until he came along, I used to maintain that the New England Patriots were the only team in the National Football League whose greatest player in history, by acclamation, was not a skill position player. Their greatest player prior to Tom Brady, without any argument, was John Hanna, an offensive guard. And no other team had to reach down to the offensive, to the hog level. He was to identify their best player. They were so bereft of true stardom at the skill positions. Nice players, but and then Brady. Brady is if he's the GOAT or not, he's in the discussion. And that game on Sunday. That reminded me so much of the guy that that he is the heir to, the spiritual heir to, and that's Montana. That was a surgical precision dissection of a team. It wasn't really. Wouldn't you agree to that? That's what it was.
Bob, it's not just that. They're playing at 7,000 feet. when 20-year-olds are going to be gassed, he's 40, Bob.
Well, you know,
he's 40.
They don't follow the TB12 methodology properly. That's obvious. If they had done that had their
Come on, it's not all in the avocado. It's not all in the avocado ice cream.
They might have had a better chance.
It's not all in the avocado ice cream, but that's. I mean, so is he one? Would you put him one all time? Boston sports.
I won't, because I'm a basketball guy first and foremost. So you get a football guy, and I'm sure he would. But Bill Russell is the greatest winner in the history of a North American sport. And I'll give you the number that I always give: 21 times in his career, starting with the NCAA tournament, running through the Olympic medal round games, all best of fives and all best of sevens. 21 times he went, and someone's going home tonight. He's 21-0. I rest my case on number one. But and Brady, here's the thing about the Patriots and their 7 trips to the Super Bowl in the Brady-Belichick era. They're 5-2. They could be 0-7 easily, or they could be 7-0 easily. All the games were contested down. The first 3 were field goal games. The 2 giant miracle catch games, which beat them in the last 30 seconds of twice, and then the Seattle Pete Carroll brain fart, and then last year. They could have lost all those 7 games, and they could have won all those 7 games. It turns out he's 5-2. We'll settle for that.
Or he could be 6-2 by the time we're hitting the middle of February. Bob, love our chats. Love him. Thanks for calling in.
My pleasure, too.
You got it. That's it. It's Bob Ryan at Glow Bob Ryan.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.